Hey, Jake here, and we got to pay some bills over here at 3 Point Perspective podcast. So this episode is sponsored by SVSLearn.com. It's an online learning platform we created because we all taught at art schools and realized you could get the same level of education without the enormous price tag. With courses from the three of us and dozens of other published illustrators, SVSLearn is the best way to get an art school education at your own pace and for a fraction of the cost. Start your free 30-day trial today at svslearn.com/3point. Hello, everybody. Welcome to 3 Point Perspective, the podcast about illustration, how to do it, how to make a living at it, and how to make an impact in the world with your art. I'm Jake Parker.
I'm Lee White.
And Will Terry is not with us today. He's out on assignment. Today we are doing an interview. We're interviewing Vesper Stamper, who is an illustrator based in, where is she based? East Coast, New York area. Yeah. Right. And we just had the most amazing conversation with her. What are some of the things we go, like, what were some of the highlights from this conversation?
I would say the big takeaway is that she is working in a way that is so deeply personal to her and so specific to her that the interview just sort of flows, and you can really get a sense of how much she cares about the work that she's doing. It's not I'll tell you this. Me and Jake have a list. We were just talking about this. We have a list of questions just in case when we're interviewing somebody, we need to ask something to kind of move the interview along. And for her, we literally just started, and it was riveting right from the beginning. She's got such an interesting story, just personally. And then she's bringing that interest and her history into the work that she's making. And so we flowed for like, an hour and almost an hour and a half. I don't know how long the actual interview be, depending on how we cut it up, but it just flowed so naturally. And that's just an interesting conversation on the life of a creative person and the work that we make and how those two are intertwined together.
What's cool is she's a mom and a wife, and she's had a career for 20 years now. And she's one of these people who's thinking long-term. She's looking at the next 20 years, maybe 40 years, however long she lives. Like, this career for her art isn't something that she's just dipping her toe in. She's all in on it. And even despite what we didn't know was she had an accident which damaged her art making hand. So we get into that. We talk about that. You're
not going to stop her. I mean, she perseveres. I can't imagine how something that would stop her from making stuff. I'm not saying just art either. I mean, if you tied her hands behind her back, you're like, haha, you can't make something, she would sing. I mean, she is not going to stop making something no matter what happens,
And we also get into like children's education, which was a little side road I didn't think we'd go down, but we started talking about how do you raise artistic kids too, which I thought was interesting.
We definitely don't know the answer there, but we bring up the good questions.
We talk about it, that's for sure. So yeah, let's just get right down into it.
So music was first before art as a career.
They were always together.
What?
They were always together. Yeah. I mean, I went to art school. Like, I don't have any formal music training. I mean, I do, but like in terms of like college and high school, even high school, even high school, I was sort of like both.
So you're playing music and you're doing art. You're in high school. You decide to go to art school, but yet you're tour. I don't understand how the touring happens.
Okay, I'll try to break this down real simple. Okay. So I went to LaGuardia High School in Manhattan, the famed school. And so I was an art major, but I always did music there too. And I started playing guitar when I was 15 and playing in clubs and doing the singer-songwriter thing. And it was always doing that. And then all through college and everything.
Wait. Hold on one second. You can't jump past that high school thing. You just said you went to so you were at that school in Manhattan. That was the Fame High School?
It was.
Okay, how many times over the 4 years did you hear, "I'm gonna live forever"?
Let's just say they played it. They played it at our prom.
I knew it.
Yeah, it really was our theme song. And then my last year, I was in gospel choir, and it was like the 50th anniversary of something having to do with the school. And so like cast members came back, because a lot of them went to the school.
No way.
Yeah. So cast members came back, and we, the gospel choir, like we brought down the house, and, you know,
that's so cool.
It was awesome. And we did songs from the movie and everything. So it was fun.
How did you get into the fame? How did you get into the fame school? That's the only thing I'm ever going to call it, by the way. I don't know what it's really called, but how did you get into, did you have to apply to it? I mean, you're all of a sudden I'm realizing like, you're like a prodigy. I'm totally nervous now. I'm like, I feel unworthy.
Believe it or not. I mean, thank you. But like, believe it or not, I was the very low woman on the totem pole in my school.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
So you just kind of squeaked in the back door?
I didn't squeak in the back door, but it was like so we didn't have the typical popularity contests that other high schools have with like jocks and nerds and goths and stuff like that. We just had like who was the more serious painter. Oh, that kind of thing.
Who was more devoted to their craft than the other person, right?
Not even that really, because like I think in that regard, I had good chops, but I was not a fine artist. Like I was not a I was not a postmodernist. I was not or a modernist painter, anything like I didn't even understand how to, like, I tried it, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I was really an illustrator from childhood. So, and the illustrators didn't get the respect. We were in that school as we still are now. Like,
I see.
we're our own fandom, you know, like,
right.
No, like nobody else really cares, but like we'll exist in our little, you know, geek out fan world. And that's how it was in high school too. But I always did music as well on the side. Like I said, I mean, I was performing in clubs since I was 15.
And you play guitar and sing and drum? Like you could be a one person band if you needed to.
No, I'm not a good drummer. Although, I mean, my husband and I had a little, like we had an art pop duo, and I did play one bass drum. With Alice. But no, I played guitar, and I'm a singer, and I accompany myself on guitar. But when I had the accident in 2012, I lost my guitar playing ability, unfortunately.
Oh no.
Okay, back up 1 second, because that's its own topic. But the band that you were in, here's my prediction. I'm getting ready to ask her what band she was in, and she's going to say something along the lines of Fleetwood Mac or some huge band. And
that's so funny that you say that, because so our band was called Ben and Vesper. So my husband's name is Ben. Okay, so, and we're on Spotify and all that. You can find us, iTunes and whatnot. It's Ben + Vesper. Because if you try to Google
music.amazon.com, then I know you're really big, because that's the one that I'm pretty sure we're on there. Subscribe to. So,
but if you tried to Google Ben and Vesper, you'd find this chemistry professor in Illinois whose name is actually Ben Vesper, which is so weird. And of course, we contacted him and sent him a record.
I found you.
There we are.
Okay, that's how can we lead the show in with some of her music? That would be awesome.
That would
Daniel,
be cool.
If you can,
we'll probably get hit for a copyright violation because
it's my copyright.
Yeah, she owns it. We're talking to some authority figure here for the copyright.
We get an email from Vesper.
Yeah. Hey,
excuse me.
Yeah.
No,
are you your own label, or do you like? Is this? No, are you with another label?
We're on an indie label called Sounds Familiar.
And
you did all the artwork for your albums?
My husband and I did it collaboratively. Yeah.
That's super
He's
cool.
also an artist.
You guys are like the Decemberists, like the early version of the Decemberists. Amazing. Okay, so you're playing music, you're doing artwork, and you get in a crash of some sort?
Right. So I was mid-career by that point, and I was literally like about to deliver a picture book the next day.
Oh.
And I was rear-ended by a texter. This happened. It was actually the third time I was rear-ended by a texter, but this one was particularly bad. And like, as soon as she hit me, I knew something was wrong. And it turned out that, so I have brachial plexus palsy. So like she, killed a nerve in my shoulder, my working shoulder.
Oh, dang.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I lost about 1.5 years of work. I somehow I somehow managed to convince the publisher to give me like a little extra time to finish the cover, because I think it was the cover I was delivering. But I was like, I was in a sling, like a full wraparound sling, like around my body. And I was like I had to hold my hand like this to finish the cover. And I even had some commissions that Christmas that I was doing, and I got them all done, but it was all like this. And then once that was over, it was about 1.5 years before I could like really work again, because I like dropping the brush. Like I didn't have any, enough control. So yeah, it was pretty devastating.
All right. Go ahead, Jake.
I was just gonna say, where are you at now? Like, have you had physical therapy and stuff? And
oh yeah. So I was in pretty much full-time physical therapy, like 4 days a week for hours a day for 2 years. And in fact, they didn't even know what was wrong. They kept thinking maybe it was like something in my neck, or it was orthopedic or something. And finally 2 years it took for them to diagnose that it was this nerve.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so I can't lift my arm or anything, like, I can sort of like telescope it, and, nope. I've worked very, very hard. And a lot of people with disabilities will tell you this, that they work very hard to not shine a light on their disability. Because I just decided early on, like, I have way bigger fish to fry,
Right.
in my life, than to let this, sock me.
Yeah. Right. Okay. No, I have some practical questions, since this is a, illustration podcast, and I like to dive into the details, and this is some of the stuff that people don't really talk about too much. So I want to dive in.
Yeah.
Looking back on it, well, I guess I'll ask the question first. Did you have disability insurance? And did that cover the cost of all this stuff? Or looking back, if you didn't, would you recommend having that in case? Because I always worry about that. I mean, I'm a skateboarder, mountain biker. I fall, completely shatter my arm, and then what happens next? And so, how'd that go for you?
No, that's so granular. I love that. This is like the kind of shop talk that I love. It's like, because we want to be able to go in this career for decades.
Yeah.
Right.
And I remember somebody telling me in grad school that the average lifespan for an illustration career is 10 years. And at that point I was already at 15, and I was like, oh shoot, like,
this is news to me.
No, it's like, I am going down with this shit, baby. Like I am all in. I am illustrating forever. Like I will be buried with my Kolinsky brushes. Like that's it. So I did not have disability insurance. But because I was not at fault in this, and it was a car accident, my car insurance paid for it. And I did sue the driver. So I was able to recover some damages. Nothing like what I was really owed, because I was in New Jersey at the time. I had New Jersey insurance, and they have like a cap. So it was unfortunate. That's a whole other thing. But I think that I think it's why I don't have disability insurance now, but I think that would be wise, especially because both my husband and I are freelancers, and he definitely puts himself into some dangerous situations because he's a filmmaker. So thank you, Lee. I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah,
it's a good one to have, because I've seen a couple of illustrators go down with both acute injuries where it was an unexpected thing, like what you're talking about, but maybe they slipped on the eye. Like I don't want to say you're fortunate that it was a car accident, but at least there's some mechanism that brings in insurance and all that stuff. But if somebody sort of falls on the ice, for example, like you're walking, fall on the ice, you break your arm, and all of a sudden, your health insurance might pay for the initial break, but it's the 2 years after that where insurance companies will be like, no, we're not paying for that. And then, we also had a student, really proficient student who was really doing well. He got an agent and all this stuff. And then he was working so hard at being an illustrator that he actually damaged the tin. He just had, what do you call it? Carpal
repetitive
tunnel.
Stress. Yep.
And all of a sudden he couldn't illustrate. He ended up having to just be a writer because it was all, and I just think about these just random things that happen. And I always like to play the game of, what if, and so it's just something that's been on my mind lately. So it's interesting.
Yeah. And you don't know until you go through it, the sense of loss that you feel. I'm very fortunate that I was able to recover a way of working that enabled me to keep illustrating, but the loss of my music has been devastating to me. Like, I can't even really think about it for more than a few seconds because it's existential for me,
That's part of who you were.
Yeah. Like, I was able to express myself in music in ways that I can't through visuals, there's something like music is that transcendent language that is directly from your soul, and when you lose that, and I mean, I write now, but it's not the same. Writing is not music for me. It doesn't fulfill that same, like, there are things that I can do in writing that I can't do in illustration and vice versa.
Right.
But music is different. So anyway, I guess my point is just that I think when we're just starting out and we're young and we're in our 20s and the world is our oyster and we're just like, there's so many options, right? You have this buffet of like, what will I be an editorial illustrator? Will I, do books, whatever, maybe I'll do all of the above. And then in a moment, the thought that your calculus would have to completely shift. And that you would have to accept that, like, there are certain things that, like, you'll never be able to do again. I mean, I try not to use language like that either. Cause I have my guitar behind me hanging on the wall. Like, I'm not putting it away. Right. And it's been 9 years. But I don't know.
See, I mean, what's the value? See, that's what I think about too. Like you said, you sued the driver. I would think I'm going to sue this person for $1 billion because I can't play my guitar for the rest of my life. That has a value to it. That's just, it's such a bummer.
What would so having gone through that, like, what would your advice be to a creator? Like, would you say diversify? Like, don't go all in on one thing and find joy in like a handful of things so that you can, because you never know what could be taken away. That's sort of what I'm pulling from this, but would you have something different?
Definitely. Yeah. Like, okay. So I think that what we don't talk about enough as artists is that you're trying to craft a life. And, I teach seniors now, and they're all they're so preoccupied and like myopic about graduation and what's going to happen upon graduation. And for some of them, like, are they going to be able to stay in the country, And it's like all of your energy is just pinpointed toward that one question. But a lot of what I try to do when I'm teaching them and when I visit schools and things like that is to try to break up that ground and try to get them to think at least 5 years out, if not 10, if not until they're 80, like set a vision for when you're 80. What kind of life do you want to be able to live? Do you just want to be chained to your drawing desk? Now, listen, I love being chained to my drawing desk.
I was going to say,
I mean, I'm here like 16 hours a day. So, I love what I do. I wouldn't want to do anything else. But I think that, first of all, yes, like diversifying, because I mean, we all know that depending on book contracts to come through to the constancy that you would need to, like, pay your mortgage like reliably over years and years. I mean, even the best of the best don't really have like that lined up all the time. Right. So having things that get you out of the studio, even author visits, or like illustrator visits or lectures or anything, but also, yeah, like diversifying not just books, but also like magazines or, you know, commissions or whatever, that if you have the time, not putting all your eggs in one basket like that is really good. But also I know a lot of illustrators who write now and didn't ever expect to, myself included. I never expected to write. And now I'm a novelist.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like,
You know?
she's not just diving in for, you know, a 200 word picture book. You're doing like full on novels.
Listen, I tried to write the 200 word picture books for years and nobody wanted what I was. I've never sold one. Wow. And I just had I had to realize, and I didn't know this until grad school when I actually started writing these novels, that it's a better fit for me. Like picture book writing is a skill that I do not really possess. I don't have the instinct for it. You know, that sort of quick turnaround, or like, you know, to be able to sum it up and condense it that way.
Right.
It's not really my forte. I hope I'll do it. I'm still trying, but
it's so much harder than you'd think it would be.
Yeah, people underestimate it. But then I'll receive an offer for a picture book that has writing which I consider subpar, which I don't understand.
Makes me think that part of that job is also being the salesman, like selling your work, you know?
I just don't know how it happens sometimes with some of these manuscripts that come through. And then I carefully craft one that I think would sell. And they're like, nah, we're good.
You know what? For me, I mean, I'm really in this for the children. Like, I love the picture making part of it, but I really am in this for the children because I've had a sense of mission about this since I was like pretty young. Because this is what books did books saved my life, you know? And so my sense of like how much children deserve good literature, it really gets my hackles up when they're sold garbage.
Yeah,
I can't abide it. Like, I think people don't really understand children. And you would hope that people who are making work for children, like, actually liked that. I know Maurice Sendak didn't like kids, for example. Right. But at least he was in touch with enough of his own child self, you know, that he could pull from that. But I think a lot of us, we think that all that kids want is like the big goofy eyeballs and, you know, cartoons and
right. You're saying that we just don't give kids enough credit for having a full range of emotions and full range of desires and fears and everything like that are complicated. They're not so simple as children's books sometimes make them out to be.
It's not like childhood is a joke. It's not like childhood is one big joke. You know, and if we can just keep the kids entertained with enough jokes, then they'll leave us alone and not bother us with their needs. I mean, what the hell?
It's true. One of the things that me and my wife talked about when you know, our son is 11 now, and one of the things we've done his whole life is try not to discount his feelings. What, like, you know, kids get upset about all kinds of stuff, especially as they go through, 1 year old, 2, 3, 4, 5. It can be something as, I threw a stick in the water and I really wanted that stick. And we try not to say, oh, it's just a stick, don't worry about it. Because to him, it's real. I mean, it's visceral almost that he lost this thing that he cared about. And we try not to discount that because, oh, you're just a kid. That's not a real concern. But they do have real concerns and real feelings, you know?
Yeah. And real joys and real sorrows. And like when I had my first child, I was so conscious of the fact that I was raising a future adult. Like I wasn't just raising a child that was going to be fun and sort of like be a nice accessory to my brand, you know? It was heavy, you know? And
that's the thing is the majority of your relationship with that person will be them as an adult.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm going to start referring to my kids as future adults. If everybody did that, it would give a better path, I think, you know.
They're really only like impressionable where you have influence on them. Yeah. For like so 8 years, maybe.
It's so short. It really, I mean, my kids are now, that first child is 18 he's going to be 19 next week. Yeah. You know, my daughter is 16, and I think that there's a way that we've got this sort of twisted right now, which is that, we just treat kids like adults, but that's not the same thing.
Right.
Because the fact is that they're not equipped, right, with adult decision-making apparatus. That's the job of childhood, that you're building that in. You're building in that kind of like ability to make sense of your emotions and like to get perspective on why losing the stick in the water matters or doesn't matter, or that there will be other sticks that you can find. And, and sometimes we lose things that we love, there's a picture book right there,
I read a, believe it or not, a tweet that has had such a profound impact on me.
That is such a Jake Parker quote right there. That is Jake Parker in a nutshell.
It distilled this kind of concept into just this like one idea, and it was the worst part of being a kid is you could have the most devastating night of your life and still have to go to school the next day, and like deal with teachers and other teenagers and whatever. Like, and that's, you think, oh, kids, small people, small problems, whatever, but it's not. It's
proportional,
just as big as whatever you're dealing with. And you don't have all the coping mechanisms you do now, that you've learned throughout life. So,
when you write and you're writing for children, do you write with your kids in mind, or is there a particular age that you seem to go back to who you're speaking to?
Well, it kind of has become teenagers now, because I write young adult historical fiction. So never saw that coming. But I find that there's obviously some stuff that I needed to continue to go back to in my own teenage years, that was important, because I'm finding that there's like an endless well to draw from there. I actually remember very little I had a pretty traumatic childhood. And so I remember precious little of it, but I can easily go back to my teenage years. And that is sort of, it gives me an open door to kind of go back a little bit further. Like if I can just channel it through teen, I can go back a little bit further and sort of recollect some stuff.
Do you keep a journal or diary or anything?
Oh yeah. I'm a big journaler. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cause I wasn't great until my 20s, my early, 1920 is when I really started recording things. And up until then it was like, I'd read a journal entry because maybe my mom was like, you should write it. It'd be like, I had school today, hopefully mom makes pancakes tonight or something, so
right.
But I'm wondering how, because I forget things, and I'll have a friend who will remind me of an experience, and I'll have completely forgotten it had he not reminded me.
Yeah. So
I'm just wondering, how do you remember all that?
I mean, a lot of it is just feeling it viscerally. I'm not a huge I'm not emotionally driven, let's say. I'm a pretty facts and logic kind of person. I'm kind of a data person, which is why historical fiction is a pretty good fit for me, because it takes so much research and all of that. But what I do is I feel things bodily, very intensely. My sensory apparatus is very finely tuned, so sometimes I'll feel something and not understand why, until I can process the memory of it or whatever, or connect that I felt this way to when something happened to me or whatever. And so I think writing for me, journaling and drawing, even without the journaling, I still have drawings I did when I was 5. And wow. I can go back to those drawings and remember doing them in some cases, or at least remember that time, maybe if it wasn't that exact drawing, I can remember sitting in front of Sesame Street, sitting, laying belly down on the floor, drawing in front of watching Sesame Street when I was drawing that particular, scene, fairy tale scene. Yeah. And I think that, I mean, we could talk about, this is a whole other subject that we could talk about, but I feel like artists are losing that sense of embodiment with their work as we've gone so digital. And that's something I'm deeply passionate about this. But that's, that's another subject.
I want to hear what I want to go down that a little bit. Tell me kind of what you're thinking there.
Yeah. So I have a podcast called Vesperisms. And so I have 4 tenets there basically. And one of them is that, art is human centered. So what I mean by that is that we create as human beings in a body for other human beings who are also in bodies. Right. And that, as to be an artist is to be somebody who's open to input. You're constantly, you're open to stimulus all around you. You're always trying to make sense of the world around you. You're very, we're visual, we're auditory, like this all matters. It all kind of goes into the stew, and what I remember when I was in art school, even like the discussion about how big our sketchbooks were or how big or small we were working really mattered, because you would notice that if you were working too small, you got really tight, and then the drawing would look distorted. But if you could just, get yourself onto like a big 18 by 24 pad or something, and like with, charcoal instead of just like, markers or something like that, whatever, that your drawing became more accurate. And because you were processing things more like bodily, like with a full body experience. Right. And what I notice is, as we've not just gotten away from things like Cintiqs and Wacom tablets, but we've gotten now onto the iPad, like something that you can just take on the subway with you. And it has really shrunk our perspective and our experience. And I think that artists right now, like, they don't understand how materials work. Like, they don't, like, I think this is why a lot of digital art can look so bad, is because you're going for a texture, let's say. Like, let's say you got all your great brushes and everything, your digital watercolor brushes. But if you don't understand how watercolor moves on a page, it's always going to look fake. Yeah. And you're always going to be like, oh, I use that brush too, But I think just emotionally, and I think what it's done as we've, not just from a technical standpoint, but what it's done to us as artists and as an artistic community is it's shrunk our perspective down to where I think that we're very easily, we can be very easily manipulated ideologically as well, because our world has been so compressed and shrunk down that it's distorted, just like those drawings. So that's so.
And there's sort of like a binary approach to everything. Subject matter. Like, it's either this or this. It's either you're that or that. Right. There's the gray is getting lost.
Well, I noticed that in my class, when I would hear students talking before class or after class during breaks or whatever, they would, we'd say, for example, we're talking about a movie. Most of the time people would either love it or hate it. Nobody was ever like, well, it was okay. It's really become, like you said, binary. It's black and white. I hate it or I love it. And then if you hate it, then you're just visceral about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And if you love it, you have to like defend it to your dying breath and like,
and it's like hill. Knives are out. Like, my daughter said to me that there's like this huge debate over Benedict Cumberbatch, like whether he's attractive or not, right? And you either love him or hate him. And I'm like, oh, he's okay. And she's like, no, you either love him or hate him. I'm like, no, he's just really okay. Great actor, and not, I don't think he's ugly. I don't think he's hot, but great actor. Can I say that? And she's like, no, you have to take a side. Like,
that's so funny. The other thing I've noticed is people don't say, I don't know anymore. Pay attention for our listeners. How many people say, huge. I don't know, if you're asked a question or just asked to give an opinion, nobody says, I don't know enough about that opinion to really weigh in. Everybody's like, I read one article about this and now I'm going to fiercely dive in. It's really weird how often it's almost like everybody's an expert on everything. Nobody says I don't know ever, but I don't know is such a powerful thing.
Or you completely hedge. People are always hedging.
Right. True.
I know this isn't for everybody, but here, and you may find that it's different.
I can't stand it. I can't stand it. At least I don't know gives you an open door for your curiosity. And like, I think that that is something that I've definitely noticed since I got into because I got into this, I graduated from my undergrad in 98. So I went right into working for .coms and, doing that whole thing. But it was like, the internet, there was no social media. It was just chat rooms and things, and the 90s was a golden age. I'm not going to lie. I will defend that, that it was really a golden age of curiosity. There was a lot of new things happening. There were a lot of opportunities to be yourself. Like we didn't have the same kinds of, in terms of like being a woman in the industry, I didn't feel any any barriers at all. It was a really good time to be getting into it. And but I've noticed over the years that artists have really lost a huge amount of curiosity. And there's this mutually enforcing orthodoxy that is very institutional, and I'm very anti-institutional. I am not like a defender of like big power. I'm not. Again, I came up in the 90s when we were talking about like Newt Gingrich and censorship and, like the moral majority and all that stuff. And I was taught as an artist, like, no, you keep your independent mind, and when you start to notice that people are kind of trying to creep in to control your mind or your perspective or what you're curious about, it's like you reject that. And so I developed a very, very strong, allergy toward things like censorship or, just a dogmatic approach to something like art. Like to me, those two things they're not even the same universe. Like art and dogma. Like, I don't even understand what you're talking about,
Right. So go ahead. Sorry. I
was just going to say, like, now writing historical fiction, like what's become my beat, which is also very strange to me, is I study totalitarianism, and the books I write about are about like mass movements, totalitarianism, like the roots of those things. How do they get started? And like, who are the people who, what does it take to become a participant in an oppressive system? And so, I mean,
and you're talking about like Nazi Germany and that kind of stuff.
I'm talking about many, many things, Nazi Germany being one of them. I'm writing a book right now about East Germany, about the Berlin Wall going up. That's coming out this year. And that's 150,000 words. No, I'm sorry, 105,000 words on like where I've done an extremely deep dive into how did Germany go from Nazism to totalitarianism, communism? Like that's a real, you want to go for a ride. I mean, that's crazy. But
and your book is set it's fiction, so you're kind of weaving a story within this factual kind of in timeline.
Yeah, and I have very good fact checkers.
I bet. So, you have to.
Nobody lets me get away with anything. So, I'm a good researcher. I know my stuff. I know the literature. So, and what I think, especially writing about teenager, because these are teenage protagonists that I'm writing about, it's like, what does it mean to be a young up and coming? And they're always artists. I'm sorry. All my characters are artists in some manner. I can't get away from it. But what does it mean to be a young up and coming comedian, an actor, when there's now there's a canon that you're not allowed to deviate from, and it's really at peril of like you losing not just your life, but like your opportunities, and what are the seeds of like losing your artistic independence and becoming a propagandist? How does that happen? Because I have a very beautiful book of Soviet propaganda posters that I studied very closely in doing this book. Is like, okay, my concern is for the children and the artists, right? That's like my heart. I want to serve the children. I want to serve the artists. So, these Soviet posters, they're beautiful. They're like amazing illustrations. They're stunningly gorgeous. Like these people are very highly trained. They were academic artists. And yet they were in service to like decades and decades of gaslighting the public. It happened under Nazism too. It like every kind of attempt at that kind of control, like they'll co-opt the artists. And I see it happening. I see it happening now. It's happening now.
They've is it memes essentially like the the thing that they're using to like sway public opinion? That's one of the things.
If only it were just memes.
Yes, but no, like that's one level. That's an art form that's been co-opted by by different governments. Like let's just flood them with memes that kind of tear down their institutions. I think that's such a great lens to look at totalitarianism. I didn't even know this conversation would get here, that I would be saying that sentence, but that to use comedy, because comedy is essentially questions everything and makes fun of everything. And how do you have a comedian in a society that won't allow you to like let you tear it down? Not tear it down, but at least let you be funny about it. Make fun of it,
Yeah, they're not so open to that, I wouldn't think. I'm really curious. Can you give us the sort of the elevator pitch of what your book is actually about? I mean, you've given us kind of a framework, but what's the elevator pitch?
Right. So this is my first book, What the Night Sings, was about the post-Holocaust period. So it was about the Jewish experience coming right out of the liberation of the camps. And so this is a spin-off from a secondary character who I won't mention who it is because that's, but basically it's about Germany reckoning with its past, and two divergent ways that a country can reckon with its past. One being suppression and denial, and the other being like an open conversation and a free, one that opens it to freedom and curiosity. So that's not exactly the elevator pitch, but the elevator pitch is actually the Berlin Wall going up in 1961 as a retelling of the Cain and Abel story.
Oh, interesting.
I'm super curious to read this book now.
I want to.
Pre-orders will be open soon, so I'll let you know.
So you're done with the whole thing, and
I just handed in the artwork. Yeah, and my novels are fully illustrated as well. So yeah, so I just delivered the artwork last week.
Are they like? What would you compare them to? That's out there. Like, is it like Hugo Cabret type of thing?
Yeah, I'd say it's more like Brian Selznick than graphic novel. Like I'm not working in panels or anything like that. And I'm not telling the story like through pictures that are written. The writing's not in the pictures. It's a novel. It's sort of like an old, if you think of Dickens and Cruikshank, that kind of thing.
So you're doing spot illustrations all throughout it?
Not spot. No, they're full spreads.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So like so I like to think that the illustrations become like a meditation, like for, like you've read this whole thing and then you have a visual meditation on it where you can stop and it can go in another way. Like, you'll understand more about the story through a side door, through the illustrations. So they're highly metaphorical, they're not just illustrating the action or anything. And that's something too that we could talk about too, is like forming pictures, like forming narratives that are not just chronological storyboarding, but are actually trying to capture an emotion and inner state of things.
It's more like poetry than any sort of like straight narrative of something.
That's exactly right, Jake.
Okay.
That's exactly right. Yeah,
Oh,
no.
wow.
And this is something I've been thinking about because, again, like I'm not trained as a writer, so, I have to rely heavily on things like Save the Cat, like, and when I'm in the process of writing a novel, like this whole wall behind me is full of Post-it notes and it's like color coded. And because I have to keep myself so on track because like I'm still learning this craft. But what I always did do, like I always kind of, when I started getting into the fiction, I would always say, well, I'm not really a writer, da, 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 da. But the fact is I've always been writing, whether it's journaling or songwriting or poetry, and that is how, like, I think when I talked earlier about feeling things embodied more than I'm like emotionally processing them, that's poetry. That's where poetry hits you. It doesn't hit you in your logical mind or even if it's good poetry, it's not trying to like draw sentimentality out of you. It's trying to get to like a deeper level of understanding. And so I've come to understand that that's what I've always been doing in my illustration work is poetry. That's
a really good way to sort of figure out yourself, who you are as an illustrator, to have that understanding. I think for me, like poetry is, I don't actively seek out poetry. Like, I want to read a book on poems right now. But darn it, if a poem doesn't get me at just the right time and impact my life when I needed it, that happens more often than, a book will impact me. I'll read a short poem and it'll just like, that gets it, that captures it. So yeah. It tells me maybe I should read more poetry. I mean, have more experiences like that.
But it's interesting if you look at that if you look at images through that lens of being poetry and having that quality of really, what you're saying is it's really about this evocative kind of feeling that it hits you more at a core instead of having to think about it. And when I think about images that last with me, that's the exact quality that they have. There's descriptive illustration where you're drawing a scene, a car crash, like something exploded or something like that. It's often just literally what's happening in the story. Oh, here's what it says, and then here's what that looks like, that scene. But when an image lasts, it has this kind of ethereal addition almost to it that that you can't quite place. And those are the images that I always come back to. And it's so funny because I see some illustrators who do fantastic work, but I see the image and I'm like, oh, that's a good image. And then I just go about my day, I forget it. And other things, sometimes it's not even so technically great, but it's just this image and I'll just keep coming back to it. It's a mark. It's so a meaning. It's just really weird. And I often talk about that with my students. How do you make something last? Like, art directors are just flipping through books all the time. They see so many images. How do you make one that has a lasting impression? It has to have that feeling. It can't just be drawn well or painted well or whatever. It's got to have this poetry that you're talking about.
And I think that that's something that can't necessarily be taught, but it can only come through experience of making those kinds of images again and again and again that are, like you said, Jake, that are really about a level of self-understanding that allows you to bypass, that first layer. And, when I'm thumbnailing for a book, like, of course, like I'll throw down that first layer thinking on a page of thumbnails, but then I have to go to the next, is this really capturing like the mood of what I'm trying to say? Because I think what you're saying, Lee, is that the images that stay with us, they draw up memory. It's working more with memory than it is. And, I think it has to be said that there's different kinds of illustration. Like if I'm illustrating like Count Chocula cereal box, I'm not going to waste my time trying to like draw up this like huge evocative memory mechanism,
Wait, did you illustrate the Count Chocula box?
No, I did not, but I ate a lot of Count Chocula as a kid. So
I kind of want to see that box done in your style now. I think maybe that'd be interesting.
That's the next Inktober. Right. Yeah, you got
well, I have a
cereal boxes.
I have a question to you, going back to something you said earlier, but But I'm glad we kind of added all this stuff on top of it. So you've noticed that students their world is sort of shrinking into this small binary kind of thing. In not just the thinking, but the actual tools and everything. So how do you teach? What way do you teach to get out of that kind of thinking and out of that kind of mark making? Because you are a teacher. And how do you counteract that tendency, that direction that we're going?
Well, I think that it has to start with teachers. I think the teachers have to break themselves out of accepting lowest common denominator, and really giving their students the assignments that, no, you're not allowed to do this digitally, and my policy in my class is that for final art, it's fine. You can, whatever you're most comfortable working in, you can work digitally. I don't care. I'm not trying to like rain on your parade or anything, I teach portfolio. So it's like, clearly like they want to make final art in that class. But for instance, over the holiday break, I had them do reportage. So they had to do it. They were not allowed to do it digitally at all. They had to get a sketchbook and physical materials, and they had to sit in spaces with other people and draw. One girl drew all the drink, like her bubble tea, like all the drinks she had over the holidays. She just did this lineup in cafes and stuff, and it was she learned so much from that exercise. And the next assignment that she did that was final art, like drawn out of that, was like miles ahead of the work that she had been showing the next semester. And she even felt like, this is more authentic to me. So I think that, so it has to start with teachers, but I think we need to be talking, like when I was in school, we had that debate too over like what's more valid, right? Like digital or traditional materials, but that's not the point. It doesn't matter what you hand to the art director at the end of the day. It's about how you got there. And again, because like we're in this for a long game, and we want to create work that's satisfying to us. That's not just, because like you get into those jobs where it's just like, oh, I'm churning it out. And it's like soul sucking. And like, who wants to work like that? And don't we want to feel like our work makes an impact in some way, or like helps somebody along the journey? Or, I mean, and so those things matter. So the kind of mark making you're doing and it matters. It all goes in to the equation.
I do wish there was more emphasis on. Oh, go ahead, Jake.
Well, yeah, your art should be human centered. You said there were 4 tenets that you go by, and that was the first one or one of them. Are the other ones sort of backing up this, like how do we make artists more curious? How do we help them to make art? That essentially right now it's this situation where art is being made on small glass squares to be viewed on small glass squares. How do we break out of that?
It's a lot of that. Yeah. So it's, one of the first tenet of Vesperisms is artists see. And that seems so simple, right? But it's actually an incredibly complex calling that's on the artist. Because if all you see your job as an artist is to work on the glass square and create a commodity for a corporation, then, I mean, I don't know at that point if you can even call yourself an artist. You're making widgets at that point. And I didn't get in this to make widgets.
I like how you put that. You're making a commodity for a corporation because they need content. They need eyeballs to look at things, and instead of them making it themselves, we'll incentivize artists to make it, or photographers, or filmmakers, or whoever.
Yeah, and I think that I think if artists of any discipline, whether it's film or illustration or music or whatever, if we want to uphold the integrity of our field, then we have to be the ones to fight for that and to not let ourselves be commodified, because yes, I mean, the corporations need content and there's nothing wrong with that. Widgets must be made, but, and I make widgets too, in a way, we all do that. But I just think we have one life, you know, and I really believe in the artist's calling. So like when I say that artists see, we've all been in rooms where people don't know what to make of us, or they, you know, they're like, oh, well, you're like really artsy. And this is like my least favorite word on the planet. It's like artsy. Okay. Well, like to me, I'm perfectly normal, you know? And not that I think other people are weird. I'm just like, well, I'm just a human being. Like, and this is, you know, but I think that when somebody like receives the gifting of art, it's something that's been given to them, and it has certain demands, and it's a calling. So, and I think that the artist, I really believe, and I'll defend this, that the artist's calling is to stand outside. So the reason we all feel like misfits, and the reason we feel like we never fit anywhere, and we're, you know, why are people keeping on calling me weird and artsy? Like, it's because we're meant to occupy that space. We're meant to stand outside of things and to be translators, you know? That's why visual things are so powerful. It's because we're translating an unseen reality into a seen reality for people, and they need that. But do we want to let that be commodified, or do we want to let that, you know, be in a sense sanctified? You know, there's a lot more meaning behind having your work being like a sanctifying presence in the world.
That's interesting. So I want to go back to something very early on in the conversation, in that you were an illustrator surrounded by fine artists in high school, right?
Yeah.
So what do you say? What do you say is the difference between illustration, fine art, an artist, an illustrator? Are they the same, or is there something different?
I think they're all fields of art. And I don't think we need to pit one against the other. They're just different disciplines. And I think that being an illustrator, obviously you're trying to communicate concepts, maybe let's say to a broader public or whatever. But I think that even that is not really a helpful distinction, because this is all very modern, the way we're thinking about this. The notion of sort of like a private art world, that, you know, this elite kind of private art world of the gallery or of the installation or whatever, it's very, very new. And I think that the reason it can often become a confusing subject of conversation, and we feel like, well, what's the nuances here, is because like we really don't know what we're doing. I think it's gonna take centuries, you know, to parse that out. But I think illustrators by their nature are communicators. And I think that before, I don't know, let's say before Duchamp, okay, everybody was an illustrator.
I totally agree with that. I actually teach that whole thing. But if you look at how Renaissance artists worked, you know, they're considered fine art now, you know, but they work exactly like illustrators. They were commissioned.
Yeah, they worked on commission. Yeah.
Yeah. And they had to get their subject matter approved. Sometimes they have to repaint it if it was the wrong subject matter. They couldn't just paint whatever they wanted to. It had to be very specific. They were illustrators.
Right. And so were the iconographers before them, you know, who were working namelessly, you know, in monasteries. And and that's a little bit different because, yes, there were, you know, commissions and things, but it was also like an act of devotion, you know, that the artist was, in a sense, like, even if they were working in a very prescribed milieu, they still were expressing their devotion through this icon, let's say.
Right.
But, you know, there were also public artworks, you know, everything was really, everything was made to communicate an unseen reality and to do this kind of translation work. And it wasn't more exalted than anything else. It was a part of the fabric of society that, and really, like, anybody could be taught to do it. You know, there were great iconographers that created sublime works like Andrei Rublev, for example, but, you know, anybody, I think of like the Jane Austen heroines, right? Who they all knew how to draw and like take silhouettes of people and, you know, and play the piano and all these things, right? It was just like, maybe that was more of an upper class kind of thing, but there's always been this sense that art is for all of us, and that the artist has a specific job to do, but we're not gods, you know, like, yes, we have this particular superpower, which is a superpower, but like, I could teach somebody to draw in 5 minutes. I can. I've done it, you know, and it's fun. It's fun to see, you know, a little bit of it exists in all of us.
You know, it's kind of an interesting thing that, sorry, Jake, just a little aside there, that I've noticed in art training that in almost every other kind of endeavor, creative endeavor or physical endeavor, whatever, people can acknowledge that if they train, they'll get better. If I want to play piano, I'll learn. So I can learn how somebody will teach me. If I want to be a martial artist, I can go to karate school. But art is the only thing people say, I'm not good at it. I could never be good at it.
Oh,
I never hear people say that about other stuff.
I can't tolerate that. Yeah, that's ridiculous. It's like saying that you can't learn to read or write.
Right. Yeah.
It's a skill that you can learn, and it is something that you get better if you do it. You don't get better at it by looking through your Instagram feed. You get better by doing it. You know?
This is one of the things that's frustrated me from teaching at the college level is the building I was in shared. It was like the arts building, so it had all the musicians on one side and the artists on the other side, and I would walk past, you know, these practicing rooms, and someone would be in there with their violin, and it just sounded amazing. And I'm like, you know, this person has been playing their violin in a very sort of rigid framework, like 4 hours a day since they were 4. And here they are in college, and now what are they learning? They're learning, you know, how do I take it how do I be more expressive with it? I know all the notes, I know all the hand positions and all that. And then I go into my art class, and these guys have been drawn in their sketchbooks, but no one has had any like formal training. So now I'm like, okay, here's how light and shadow works. Okay, here's what a composition is. And I kind of wish, like, why can't there be like formal art training from age 4 until college? And then in college, I could just teach you how to like make a cool children's book, you know?
Well, I think it used to be much more part of things, you know, when I was growing up. Like there was a little bit more focus on, you know, on fluency, on skills fluency and things. But I am so over this whole concept of, oh, don't make the kid color in the lines, or like, don't put too many strictures on them. No, this is wrong. This is actually wrong. This is developmentally wrong, because when kids, you know, I'm very influenced by Waldorf education. So I really believe, like, until they're about 6 or 7, you don't wake them up from the dream. They're in a dream. You don't wake them up. You give them what they need. You know, you give them like food and drink and let them keep dreaming. Okay. And you give them good books, and you give them good stories, nothing dogmatic, nothing political, you know, you just give them good stories so that they can start to make sense of the way the world works. Right.
Yeah.
But then once they start to come out of that dream and they start to notice that like there's skills to be attained, that's what they want. At 7, 8, 9 years old, you know, through middle school or whatever, that's the time where you teach them light and shading. That's the time where you teach them how to render. You teach them how to get that hand-eye coordination. They will crush it at that age, and they'll get it right away. You know, like I've taught kids that age, and I don't waste time with this whole like self-expression. They don't know what they think.
Right.
That's what they're trying to figure out. And you're giving them the tools to be able to express what it is that they're discovering that they think, you know? So that's the hole. Is so many holes are in the middle school years, the elementary and middle school years. If you don't get them by then you are going to be playing catch up by university time, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. The only time it will work is if you have the kids that are utterly obsessed with it, who can't stop drawing. And so they're building up the skills, and they're going and like, you know, copying the illustrations they love, or like getting the skills books or whatever, or watching YouTube videos. Like they're going to be the ones that will have no problem, you know? But when I went to grad school, I remember I went to the SVA illustration program. And I remember like Marshall Irisman telling me in my entrance interview, that a bachelor's degree is not enough anymore.
Mm-hmm.
How can that be? How can you spend 4 years and like $100,000 plus, $250,000 now?
Yeah.
To not come out with skills?
Right.
I don't understand this.
Well, you're totally right, Jake, is that they're having to start sort of from scratch at the college level to say, hey, here's how to make seriously good technical drawings, because and it takes them, we've all taught these classes. It takes a good 2.5 years to develop the good technical skills. And that's not even talking about how to use those technical skills to then say something important. Right. Mm-hmm. And so then you got this like 1.5 years. And by the time they're 1.5 years out of graduation, you're already talking about graduation. They're already worried about their portfolio then, and they just acquired the skills to be able to do it. And then the problem there is you've given them all the skills. The problem is not over a long period of time, but a short period of time. So now everybody's seen when a student has just taken an anatomy course and now all their characters have muscles all the time because they want to show that they learned all the muscles. So we condensed it now, and they've got too many skills in one, because you have to pick the right note for what to play, to use a musical kind of an analogy. And they have all the notes, and they don't know how to play the song that they want to express. So it's interesting.
Yeah. I like that. Don't wake them from the dream idea. And are your kids artistic? Are they like, how have you done that?
Well, I wasn't them. I'm very much not a helicopter parent. And I wasn't the one that was like sitting down with them. I mean, I regret some of this, like sitting down with them and being like, this is, I'm not like it's the shoemaker's children,
right?
They more picked it up. It was in the water and like just watching me work all day. And, I mean, it's a great benefit to be able to work at home and for your kids to see, exactly what you do. And, they rejected it for a time or whatever, but my son, he's an amazing artist. His conceptual mind is like, he's kind of a genius. He's studying photography now. And my daughter is more of a writer, creative thinker in that way, and does a lot with her hands, but she's not, she doesn't like to draw. She doesn't think she's good at drawing. So.
Yeah, but you didn't think you were good at writing, and here you are with a couple novels. So I don't know how much self-perception matters. As long as you keep going, right?
It's true.
I've been pretty hands-off with my kids as well. They all are creative and draw. And some play music really well. They understand piano and things like that. But anytime that I've been like, okay, hey, this is how perspective works. Your perspective's a little off here. It's just like, I could just see like all the excitement just drain from their face. And they're like, maybe I don't want to draw. And so I'm like, you know what? I know how to do stuff, and you know where to find me. My office is right over here. So if you ever need any help with anything, just come and ask me. And it wasn't like my oldest, it wasn't until high school where he's like, Dad, how do I fix this? And he shows me a character design. And I'm like, okay. And that's when I'll do it. But like my 6th grader, she, I'll say like, oh, here's how horse anatomy works. And she's like, no, I'll figure it out. So I'm like, okay, just let me know when you have trouble with a horse.
It's so funny because so many people would love to study with, both of you. And then we've got these kids at home that we're trying to give this information to. And they're like, no, please shut up. I don't want it.
My son went through all of high school. I thought, okay, great. We're going to get him, like his high school has a really good art program. And I was like, great, we're going to, get him on that track and everything. After freshman year, he never took another art class until I forced him in senior year to take AP Studio Art. And I was like, no, you're doing this. Like,
no
you
son
have to
of
get
mine
some skills. Well, yeah. And it was just like, come on, like you're self-sabotaging at this point because you love it. And why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And he did great. So
yeah.
One of the things, going back to the little glass screens that all the kids are looking at, like I said, my son's 11, and here's just a hypothesis I have now about, so my son has had the Xbox for like a year and a half or whatever, and then got the Oculus. So he's got the, the headset. That's what all his friends are doing and stuff. And it's such a rich and social gaming experience or visual experience and auditory experience. It's so complete when he logs in, and he's got creative abilities in there. Like he's built like Minecraft, he's building some stuff, but the world is already complete. He's sort of just adding to it or subtracting from it. And then he sits down, you compare that with a piece of paper. It's so hard. The paper looks so blank, like more blank to him, I think, than it did to us as kids, because the comparison is, well, I can just log in and the world's already made. Why do I got to sit here with this blank piece of paper? And it's a tough one. I don't know how to rectify it. Because it's so, like water, it takes the path of the least resistance, right? Yeah. It's way easier to log in and to get that experience already made for you than to make it yourself. I don't know how to answer the question, but I worry about that generation coming through and sort of being lazy when it's like, God, this blank piece of paper is so tricky to figure out.
Yeah,
and
they don't even know look, this is not to pass judgment on any other parent, okay? But we, I can't really stand like digital sounds. They really bother me. And so when they were little, there were no electric toys in our house at all. It was all wooden, soft, natural materials. And we, believe me, we were dirt poor. Okay. So I made it work. I cobbled things together. I got things for free, but I was like, anytime anybody tried to give us an electronic toy, I returned it. And I took the risk of hurting other people's feelings, but it was partly because I was so stressed out too, that I was like, I can't stand I don't want the tinny thing in my ears, So what that meant was like, my kids never had video games. And my son loves video games. And I bought him Minecraft, when he was in middle school and whatever, because I felt like, okay, at least it's something where he's building. Like he's making environments. And I felt like that was okay. But I really, I put a lot of barriers to entry in his way. So now that he's 19, he pushed back, he really he didn't love it. I mean, he didn't give me he didn't rebel or anything like that, but I would explain, why we were making this decision and now he still plays video games and now he buys his own. So he doesn't have a game system or anything like that, but he's way less interested. Cause he kind of he got over the sort of fever of it. As a teenager, because he really understood this was not happening. Yeah. It's like airsoft guns, it's no, I don't want any kind of firearm in my house. So that's not happening. So when you move out and you have your own house, then you can do what you want, but this is my house,
How many times have I said that exact sentence? You want an Xbox? I go ahead and get an Xbox as soon as you move out. That can be your first purchase.
Get a job. Buy it yourself.
I'm right there with you on the video game thing. We have a Wii U that's 10 years old, and the kids are they get it on Saturday morning, and that's it. And our whole thing has always been, and this is I'm not here. I am. Doing the thing I said I
totally
hate to do,
not. Yes,
right. Everybody parents in different ways, and
Absolutely.
I see there is I could see the appeal to video games, but for my kids and our family, we're just we saw the obsession, and how everything else faded away, and that became the one thing, and me and my wife were just okay, this can't be a way for our children to grow up being this obsessed with this thing.
It's bizarre how seductive those worlds are and how complete they are. Have you guys seen the movie What's Wrong? Or no, what's it called? Ron's Gone Wrong?
No, I haven't heard of it.
I saw the trailer for it.
Okay, so we rented it. I think it just came out a little while, 2021. So it just came out in the last year. Anyway, long story short, it's about all these kids, and they've got basically these personal robots take the place of our iPhones and the watches and stuff. Sort of the next logical step.
Oh, that's like the new Ishiguro novel. Yeah.
Okay, so next logical step in technology, and so it sort of focuses on this one kid who doesn't have the robot, and all the other kids have the robot, and it sort of paints this one kid as not necessarily a loser, but being completely left out, and it's just it was so funny because we were watching it, and I was like, this could be, truth. A future thing that happens with technology is everybody has these like little personal robots, but the kids were so into it in the movie. And it just kind of made me think about my son's experience with the Xbox and the Oculus. And the reason that we let him play it is that the social component, we moved and all his friends are on it. Yeah. And so it's like, that's the connection to his friends in Portland and now to Nashville too. And so, but if we say no to the game, we're saying cut off those friends, or not necessarily cut off the friendships, but you see what I mean? It's easy for them to get on and have a shared experience. Yeah. But at the same time, if you look at this movie as almost a cautionary tale, it's a good movie, by the way, but it's a cautionary tale that, oh my God, like as everybody's got them, it's hard to put it down. It's hard to live without it. Yeah.
And I think that my son's in the same situation, by the way, like all his friends, when we moved where we moved, that's his touch point, and he's always had a hard time like making friends. He's not a loner, but he's just, he's one of those kids who's very like self-contained and so it's fine. So like if he wants to be up till midnight talking to his friend in California, like and the video game is the medium for that, I'm fine with that. I mean, we are at the same time working on like the kinds of social skills that will get him like friends in real time here, but and it's hard, but look, I was never popular. And as I described to you, even in high school, which I loved my high school experience, I had a fantastic one, but I was not popular in my high school either. Like I was very low on the totem pole. I don't even know what it would take to be popular. Like even in this whole illustration thing and like, how do I get my books or how do I manage social media and stuff? It's like, I haven't figured out the game. I don't even know what questions to ask. All I know is like, I have to keep making work because I love making work. And I think at a certain point in the last few years, I think especially under quarantine and everything, I had to really come to terms with the fact that I'm not like everybody else. I'm just not. And I'm 45. If it hasn't happened by now, like if I haven't hit popularity status by now, it's probably not going to happen. And I just have to make my peace with it and also see, okay, what are the gifts in that? So if I was always like the kid that was getting picked on and like, was chubby and all of these things, and in music, I was never popular because I didn't look like I was on drugs, wasn't like, I was like a curvy mom, I had a mom bod. So, I'm up there playing electric guitar and I have a mom bod. What am I going to do? Awesome. Like, I can't, I've had babies, like I can't change this, it's whatever. But I think this is again, like what I'm so passionate for artists to grab hold of and really like embrace and love about themselves is that we are on the outside. We are by our very makeup, we are marginal people, and if you can learn how to not resent that, then you can understand that you've always been the person that's been able to translate for people. You've always been the person that walks in the room and you're able to bridge gaps. You're able to get people talking to each other that would never normally talk. Like to the extent that we like are always fighting a popularity game, we're gonna miss the whole reason that we are the way we are in trying to like be some other kind of person. And we're just not that way. So if you're the kid that doesn't have like the latest gaming system or whatever, it's like, oh, well, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
And I know, Lee, your point was something completely different about like, how do I get him out of like to create something that's original to him? Like that's a different topic, but I'm saying in this desire that we are being pressured with to conform and conform and conform. It's like artists have got to reject that. We've got to like consciously, intentionally reject that and say, no, I'm a different kind of person than that. This is where I stand over here on the border. It's a good place to be.
That's awesome. Let's end the podcast with that quote. That was so good. We cannot top that quote. I
love it. I agree. I mean, I could talk for another 2 hours probably, but
anytime
we have to make some work.
Yeah.
That's actually perfect.
I'm under this crazy, I can't, I just took on this rush job that I'm like, I must have been out of my freaking mind because I'm working on 3 books at once.
You are a
due
maniac.
by March 1st.
So
I'm gearing up for another 16 hours at this point. I'm like, I just finished my first coffee. I don't know.
We should let you get to that. Thank you so much. This was amazing. I took notes. I've learned so much from this. And first item of business after this is to go listen to Vesperisms.
Yeah.
I didn't realize you had a
listen
podcast.
To that too
so,
while I work today.
Check that out.
Let me tell you guys a quick little anecdote that I thought of. I haven't thought of it in a little while. Probably 20 or 30 years, but it just came up while we were talking about this stuff when you guys were saying, oh, how do you remember things deeply? And you know, you got your journal and you know, Jake's got his method. I didn't have any of that stuff, but as my son goes through school and hits different ages and different things at school and the different grades, I then remember what my years were like there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, so he's in 5th grade now. And I just remembered, I mean, it's a totally suppressed memory that I, in 5th grade, was sat, like 24 students or whatever facing the teacher. And then I sat in a desk next to the teacher facing the students because I was out like an island in the front of the class. So I wasn't even like hooked to the teacher's desk. I was just by myself facing, but I don't remember what I did to get there. But the funny part is I never acknowledged that it was a punishment. So it wasn't a punishment. That's just where I sat. I never quit. Even then, I'm just like, I guess this is where I sit now.
Wow.
So the punishment didn't work.
Yeah.
But it was a full year punishment. I never went back to the normal time, the normal
That's
student
hilarious.
body.
You're just wired a little different. That's all. But that goes along with, the artist is outside. Like
that's what made me think of it here when you're saying the artist kind of stands on her own, kind of outside. And I was like, oh my God, I was literally separated from the student body, but didn't acknowledge it, so it didn't work.
That's intense. Yeah. There's an episode that I did called on being fireborn, and it's a talk I gave at a conference about this exact subject. So you could start at the beginning with Vesperisms, but you could listen to that one too. And
I'll check it out.
That goes deeply into this.
How often do you update the podcast?
I was doing it weekly, but about 6 months ago, I had to put it down. First of all, because I was really in deep with Berliners, like crazy writing days, but also the whole thing that's been taking place in our society, like particularly over the last 6 months. And like, it was, it's been hard to know how to talk about it because, I would be reading something in like a scholarly textbook about how the East German regime like gaslit the public. Right. And then literally I would see that thing in the news.
Right.
And so every day it was like, I'm telling you, I was like, how do I keep sane today? Like, how do I keep on track with reality today?
Right.
And I had to put all of the energy into the book. And so I hopefully it comes through in the writing, and I'm getting ready to write my author's note about it. And I'm going to write about this, like the nature of reality.
Wow. That's awesome.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
thank you so much for joining us.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. 3-Point Perspective is made possible by SVSLearn.com. We're becoming a great Illustrator starts. Your hosts today have been Lee White and Jake Parker. Again, Will Terry couldn't join us because he is out on assignment. Will Terry can be found at willterry.com and at willterryart on Instagram if he ever posts there. I don't think he does anymore. It's been a while. As soon as he has a Kickstarter, you guarantee you'll start seeing posts on there.
That's right.
Lee White can be found at Lee White Illustration and Lee White Illo, and same goes for you, right? As soon as you have a Kickstarter, you're going to see some posts on Instagram.
Oh, dude, there's a ton already getting out there. Go check it out.
And I'm Jake Parker. You can find me at mrjakeparker.com and at Jake Parker on Instagram. And I did my first post yesterday in over a month, or just about a month, just because I've been so busy doing stuff. Anyways, podcast is produced by Daniel 2. That's danieltu.co is his website, daniel2.co. Special thanks to our master of production, David Bro, and our keeper of curriculum, Austin Shirtliff, Chief Operations Officer, Lisa Fott, and a thank you to Lily Howell for our show notes. Now go draw something.